Man, fuck what I said about Sucker Punch. These guys are the true dark horses when it comes to AAA game development. We really do be sleeping on Remedy until they randomly drop some Game of the Year contender, huh? The most impressive part is that, unlike some of their contemporaries, they aren't completely owned and backed by one large publisher. Nah, these guys have been around the block. It seems like every 2 games they're scrambling to find a new publisher to back their weird ideas. It always seems to work out for them though, as they've yet to release anything straight up terrible. They do got some mid on their hands though. Part of their consistency is due to them refining their own style over the years. Since Max Payne, they've had the whole third-person shooter but with a psychological thriller twist on lock. When it comes to their games, you can always expect to be shooting at guys, but how you do it is always different and interesting from game to game. They've become masters at developing one interesting mechanic to center the games around, whether it be the bullet time in Max Payne or the launch and control. On top of that, the cinematics in their games are always quality. Story is definitely a priority with them. They don't always make sense, but they're always interesting at the very least. What's dope about this is that for the past 15 years, they've low-key been building this shared universe between all their games. Not sure where all this is headed, but now I'm even more tapped in on what they got cooking in the future. Also wish they had the rights to Max Payne again. It's not like Rockstar is doing anything with the franchise, but I digress. Obviously this shouldn't be said, but all of this is just my opinion. If you rock with it, cool. If you don't, well, you're free to make your own damn list. But anyway, enough of the boring intro stuff. This is every Remedy game ranked from worst to best.
Catch you eventually!
Maybe. But what are you gonna do then? By then, I'll have had my hands on everything you love.
So remember when I said they got some mid on their hands? Yeah, this is it. This has got to be one of the strangest follow-ups to a new IP ever. Instead of a full-fledged sequel following the cliffhangers left by the last game, Remedy was like, yeah, how about a 3-hour spin-off that leans a bit more into the action? I didn't even know this was its own shit. I thought this was DLC attached to the original Alan Wake, but apparently not. It should have been, because as its own game, it's not really worth playing through if I'm going to be honest. Especially with Alan Wake 2 out now, and all the crazy shit that forwards the story in that game, man, it has this one looking more and more like filler. So what's the issue? Because on the surface, this looks like more of good old Alan Wake. Flashing hordes of Taken with your flashlight, weaving their attacks, popping them with shots, and collecting pages of the manuscript to hear Wake's wordy narrations. The same mechanics have been brought over, except they feel slightly better here since they're more fine-tuned for action. The movement and shooting feels a bit more responsive, your flashlight burns down enemies faster, you got actual military grade weapons here, and this motherfucker Wake doesn't get exhausted after 4 steps. There's even more enemy types like these splitting guys to splice up the usual flash and shoot loop. All this has the combat feeling better, but only the combat. Everything else about this game is way worse. First off, this whole Groundhog's Day thing they got going where you have to do the same 3 levels 3 times with only slight differences. Yeah, cool idea on paper, but in execution, it's fucking painful. It's literally repetitive, and boy do you feel it by the end. I get why they did this, and story Alan is stuck in a loop of his own creation, and they probably wanted the player to somewhat experience the same hell Alan was feeling and trying to get out of it. Makes sense from an immersion standpoint, but I don't think the gameplay is good enough to justify it. Even in games where I think the combat is phenomenal, I still wouldn't want to do the same set of levels over and over again. You think I want to do it here where it's just decent at best? At the very least, with this being a 3-hour game, the combat doesn't overstay its welcome like in the original. However, it's not complemented by a cool, creepy atmosphere and a narrative that unfolds in an interesting way. Nah, American Nightmare ditches the Twin Peaks vibes for a more campy B-movie vibe where Wake is basically an action hero. And it just doesn't hit the same, man. It's hard to give a shit about anything when it all just resets, and it's hard to see Wake in this role when he's still the same melodramatic writer. They tried their hardest giving him 3 different women to rescue, all which have the personality of a pine cone. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the dialogue is mad awkward here too. Maybe it's the performances, but man, so many of these conversations feel stiff as hell compared to the original game. Mr. Scratch is definitely doing the heavy lifting here in terms of being a fun character to watch, and that's because of the physical actor Ilka Villi. He looks like he's having such a good time being evil that you can't help but share the enthusiasm. Still, him facing off with Wake isn't necessary viewing for the sequel, especially with the DLCs of Alan Wake 1 doing a pretty good job on their own setting the stage for the second game. Kind of a side note, but does anyone else think that the narrator sounds like Racevich?
The man has been brutally spat out from the darkness that surrounds the shores of our reality.
Supernaturalism explains the environment changing, and the many departments define each zone's unique visual flair.
Far from the worst game I ever played, and not really a bad one, just the worst in Remedy's catalog by a fair margin.
Two minutes to the past.
Remember this moment.
Paul, what? How?
It's fine.
This has got to be one of the most forgotten big budget exclusives of the last decade. Nobody talks about this game anymore, and even when they did, it didn't seem like anybody wanted to. Quantum Break is one of those games where the concept is cool, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. You play as this dude named Jack Joyce who can shift and manipulate time, but the game doesn't let you wild out with him as much as I would like. The gameplay doesn't stray that far from your typical third-person shooter. You're more or less going from cover to cover just pop shooting dudes. Like, you can do some cool shit here and there, like freezing guys so all your shot damage compounds, or dashing into guys for slow-mo shots up close, but after a couple uses, the satisfaction is lost quick. It doesn't feel as badass as it should. There's not much spectacle, the aiming is inaccurate, the guns are basic, the destruction is way too light, enemies are on the bullet spongy side of things, and the controls are clunky as hell. It's that bullshit realistic movement where animation takes priority and it feels like the characters are walking around with weights. Even the speed dash doesn't feel all that speedy. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a lot of Jack's abilities feel mad isolated from each other. There's not much fluidity in going from shooting to dashing to popping up a shield and anything in between. This is especially weird for this game because this is one of those cover shooters that's constantly trying to get you out of cover. Enemies constantly flanking and even being able to shoot you past cover sometimes. I don't mind this as I prefer being challenged with actually using the powers instead of just shooting guys. The problem is everything I've mentioned. You're slow as shit, and emptying your whole clip in guys is way faster than waiting for your power cooldowns. Suffice to say, the combat in this game didn't fully click with me, but it wasn't so bland to where I wanted to stop playing. Probably because there wasn't a lot of it, showing a lot of gunfights, but anyone that's played through this game knows that these are only like 30% of the game, maybe less. The other 2/3 of this are this and this. Yeah, this is one of those games that's way more focused on a whole lot of walking and talking and whole TV episodes after each chapter. I'm dead ass about that last part. These things are like 25 minutes long and are required viewing if you want to fully understand what's going on. Quantum Break has a fairly complicated plot of Jack going against one of his old buddies, Paul Serene, who also has time powers. We got jumping between different time periods to change other time periods, a big bad megacorp with its own unraveling conspiracy. Oh yeah, did I mention that the world is ending? This game is only 10 hours long, and it not only tries to juggle a TV series worth of story within this time, but also has multiple different routes depending on the choices you make as the main antagonist. It's pretty cool that you can shape Paul into the type of villain you want, but it's still a binary choice system at the end of the day. Some comrades bite the dust in one route depending on what you choose, but the end is always the same. This was probably done to cement the fact that no matter what characters change in the past, the present is always set in place. This game does a better job than most in keeping the time travel logic consistent. Definitely the most grandiose story Remedy has written, with a big cast full of interesting twists and turns, but the characters are so bland that it was really hard to give a shit about any of it. Especially the characters that only show up in the episode episodes. They barely have ties with the main cast, and these often felt like filler. This is the only Remedy game where Sam Lake isn't the writer, and yeah, you can tell with some of these lines. They managed to get some grade A acting talent here with Lance Riddick, Aidan Gillen, and others, but the whole vibe of these live action scenes still gives CW. But you know, underwhelming gameplay and story is one thing. What's inexcusable are all of the fucking technical problems. I don't know how well this game performed on Xbox, but on PC, it's fucking horrendous. I'm not just talking about inconsistent frames, although those are present. Nah, sometimes this game won't load and start up, consistent lag, the episodes after each cutscene are inaccessible in game, and there's a handful of levels where the light effects are so blinding that it makes the game damn near unplayable. It's like that flash of light right before getting knocked out, but permanent. Y'all see this shit? I had to play through this for this whole fucking fight. Felt like I got solar flared. One of the worst gaming experiences all year for me. If there's anything I do like about this game without any harsh gripes attached, is that I do like the look of this game. Obviously the graphical fidelity is up there, but I like how the further you get in this game, the more glitched out everything becomes. As like the world is a computer and it's been infected with a virus. Some Matrix shit, but instead of green and black, it's white. Leads to a lot of dope visuals. But yeah, Quantum Break is another one that falls into the mid pile. Respect the ambition, but doesn't fully come together for me. Hard to believe that the Finnish company known for their weird mystery games made this, but hey, we all gotta start somewhere, right? Released in '96, Death Rally is practically Twisted Metal from a top-down perspective, but way more focused on the racing. You start off at the bottom of the rankings with some piece of crap car, but slowly climb out of the trenches by winning races. Win enough races and you can even go against Duke Nukem himself. Going into this, I was expecting this to be Remedy's weakest output as it's their first project and looks like a damn Flash game, but nah, this game was pretty damn enjoyable. The controls are surprisingly smooth and the races themselves are entertainingly chaotic. Both you and the other racers got a whole bunch of tools to fuck each other over, from traps to spike bumpers to fucking machine guns, and it has these looking less like races and more like bumper carts taken to the extreme. How you win is just by winning the race in first place, but I like how in this game you can just delete other racers. Like, this ain't no Mario Kart where when you get hit with some shit it's just a temporary setback. Nah, every car has health, and if that shit reaches 0, then the race is over for them. You know how disrespectful it is to destroy an opponent before the race is even done? If I played this with friends and family back in the day, I know I would have been hot. Satisfying as hell doing it to other players though. Also brings a whole new dimension to the races where depending on the items equipped, you can either focus on the racing or the combat. I will say, this game is hard as shit, man. I've gotten so many damn game overs. Not only can the AI be straight up bullies, but managing your car's condition is more stressful than it looks. Not only does your car's health not replenish after each race, but neither do your weapons. Half of the difficulty is just managing your funds in the beginning. It's a bitch, but it does make winning the races feel more rewarding. But yeah, that's all I gotta say about this. One of their first games is one of their first gems. Reason it's not higher is that it is on the primitive side, and Remedy has way more interesting games in their catalog.
What's that, Al? Ooh, I'm Alan Wake. I'm always right about everything. And if I don't get my way, I'll sulk all day long. I'm always intense and moody. It makes me very attractive.
Video games answer to Twin Peaks and Stephen King novels. Not gonna lie, for the longest time I've been undecided on whether this was a good game or not. Around 2011 when I first tried it out, I thought it was kinda ass. Something about fighting guys with a flashlight seemed so lame to me as a kid. I was even shook despite this being a horror game at a time where I was scared shitless of them. I still don't think this game is all that scary, but I have warmed up to all the other aspects of it. For those that don't know, the first Alan Wake is a game about the titular character battling against this dark force called the Dark Presence to save his wife. Sounds like standard video game shit, but the kicker is that the dude's a writer, and the story that he's in is not only written by him, but all this crazy shit that's trying to kill him are manifestations of his own writing. So this is essentially a story within a story controlled by the main character. It's a weird meta-narrative on the nature of writing. The dark presence being a not so subtle allegory on Alan Wake's self-loathing caused by his writer's block and possible imposter syndrome. The story and presentation are definitely the highlights here. This game may not spook me out, but the atmosphere is still incredibly immersive. The episodic structure was pretty unique for the time, with Bright Falls not being your typical setting you see in a video game around this time. A seemingly endless sprawl of Washington woods with a fog so ghastly it feels like you're being stalked by it. I'm too young to have ever peeped Twin Peaks, but I am familiar with Stephen King's writings, and I could definitely see him writing some shit like this. Small town, eerie vibes, a creepy mystery with lots of extended tangents by our main character here. I'm not exaggerating when I say that half of this game is just listening to Alan Wake narrate his own writings. Sounds boring, but not only does the plot justify it, it also ends up strangely being one of the most entertaining things about this game, especially with all these manuscript pages that you pick up. Waite's narrations are so overwrought that they wrap all the way around and become gripping. Had a hard time predicting where all of this was going, but in a good way. Would be lying if I said that I was that emotionally invested in any of the characters, but the mystery of what's going on unravels in such a suspenseful way that it didn't really matter. Nah, all the issues I have with this game are with the gameplay. To be blunt, it's not deep enough for its runtime. Flashing Taken with your lights so they're now vulnerable to your gunshots works thematically, but man, as the main gameplay loop, it gets old after a while. It's just draining the shields of enemies 1,000 times for like 12 hours. It doesn't ever evolve from this. How the end of this game plays is near identical to the beginning. Only real difference is more enemies. Your weapon selection is mad low, the enemy variety is mad low, and there's barely any puzzles or platforming to break up the constant combat. Reason why so many of these chapters feel twice as long. The only reprieve from combat are moments of dialogue. Unsurprisingly, my favorite moments of the game were when this game felt more horror than action. Those few moments where you're overwhelmed by the number of Taken, you may not have enough resources to take them out, so you have to scurry into the light. It's moments like these where there's a bit more tension and on-the-fly decision making. I also do like how spacious a lot of these levels are. Even though the game is linear, you still get that unnerving feeling of getting lost in the woods. Apparently this game was supposed to be an open world game, but they ended up having to chop each notable location into separate levels for some reason. Ends up working out, but I can't help but feel like the original vision would have been better. Apparently this was supposed to be more of a survival game with a day and night cycle where you gather resources during the day and fight against the Taken at night in one big interconnected map. Shit, that sounds like a game that's actually deep enough to keep a motherfucker engaged for 12 hours, but it doesn't exist, so it doesn't matter. The point is that the presentation and story is good, but the novelty of pointing at scary things wore off fast, which is why I rank this game in the middle of the pack here. The closest we're gonna get to insert telekinesis character here game. Man, this game was like the complete inverse of Alan Wake for me. Rather than the gameplay being mid with the story and atmosphere being really strong, it's the gameplay and atmosphere that's really strong with the story being mid. Okay, maybe mid is a bit too harsh, but all of these years later and I still don't know what to make of it. The plot itself isn't that confusing. It's about our redhead Jessie here clearing out this evil force called the Hiss from the main headquarters of the FBC. Her brother is also roped into this shit and she has to save him too. This whole thing is like if Jean Grey was going around the SCP Foundation fucking with SCPs. Okay, that was probably a terrible comparison, but you can't tell me that wouldn't be amusing. That sounds like it would be a lot more joyful than what goes on here. My problem with the story is that it's presented in such an obtuse, cryptic way that I had a hard time connecting connecting with any of the characters and events at hand. Characters are constantly double speaking, and you have to read like mad collectibles to fully understand what's going on. I do understand why it's like this though. The whole vibe of this game does read like an SCP entry. The brutalist architecture, the mundane office lights, and the ritual chants from the hiss creates this cold, dreamlike atmosphere that you don't often see outside of horror games. The oldest house simultaneously feels like a place you've been before, while also feeling completely out of place with its impossibly large amount of rooms. Uncanny familiarity is something that Remedy has always been good at creating. I may have not cared about the people inside here, but I really dig the world that they built here, especially with all the objects of power that you can run into with all types of weird effects. Wish this game was more focused on these rather than Jessie's reasons for being here. Yeah, Jessie's a bit on the bland side. I don't think her expression switched up one time throughout this entire journey. She has a lot of thoughts, but it all just comes back to her brother in the bureau. Would be lying if I said that I gave a damn about what she had going on, but her cold, stoic personality not only fits the tone of the story, but also the arc she has of slowly accepting the director role of the bureau. But look at me going on this long talking about all the things around what you actually do in this game. Nah, the main thing that makes this game super dope and why I have this game ranked on the latter half here is the goddamn telekinesis powers. Being able to pick up damn near any object around the room and just launch it at dudes feels and looks badass all throughout. Environments are mad destructible, so fights with the hiss end up being these flashy messes where it looks like a damn tornado went through. It's crazy how detailed this game can look while being this messy during fights. They did not give a fuck about people's PCs with this one at the time. Hell, even the gunplay feels pretty good with your service weapon here being able to transform into a good number of shooting forms. It interplays with the telekinesis powers smoothly. Sucks that you don't get enough experience to where switching between all of them is viable. You more or less have to stick with two the whole way through. I don't really have any issues with the bonfire checkpoint system since the combat is so satisfying that I just never got tired of fighting enemies, but man, I avoided side quests like the plague, and that's because the map is so awful that it made navigating this game unbearable at points. Really my only big gripe with the gameplay. Yeah, I can't wait for Control 2. There's already a good baseline here, and all they really gotta do is just give Jessie more destructive telekinetic powers while maintaining the same creepy Lovecraftian vibes. Far from perfect, but definitely one of their better games.
It's me. Open up. Let me in, quick.
Not so fast. The password. John Who.
Come on. Okay, John Woo.
All right. Come right in.
It's a trap! It's pain!
In the intro I mentioned it, but yeah, Max Payne is one of those games where one unique mechanic can carry a whole game. There's more going on here than just shooting gang members, but man, it really does come back to the bullet time, doesn't it? Bursting through a room and blasting a whole bunch of dudes Matrix style just never gets old, man. 2 decades later, and this simple mechanic makes the gunplay in this game more exhilarating than a lot of third-person shooters today. Imagine playing this game at launch back in 01. Shit, you don't even need to tell me. I already know that this game was head and shoulders above most other third-person shooters at the time. And the reason I know this is because the other devs took note. This game low-key spawned a whole subgenre of Max Payne clones that never got the same love. Listen, if you're inspiring a whole genre, then you know you're doing something right. And this game does a lot right. The whole vibe of this game is just super dope. Obviously, this game isn't impressing anybody graphically anymore, but the art direction is still strong as hell. This game just owns the neo-noir aesthetic. I can't think of any other game with cutscenes like these. These graphic novel comic panels just ooze grit. The lack of color outside of gray and brown, the chalk-like sketches that give the backgrounds a dark blurriness, the realistic looking characters that ground everything. Not only do all of these things give this game a unique dingy look, but it also has it aging better than most of its time. The music is appropriately brooding, and what brings it all together is Max Payne's grizzled narrations. R.I.P. James McCaffrey, man, his voice really does set the tone. His performance not only sells you on Max's hard-boiled attitude and numbness to everything, but puts over the grim events of the narrative. It's so good that from here on out, every Remedy game would feature a main character that monologues their inner thoughts. The story itself is more or less your typical vigilante cop story. Max Payne goes around New York wreaking havoc, trying to find the masterminds behind the murder of his family. It ain't the deepest story in the world, but it's not trying to be. You like and understand Max, the vibes are tight, and there's plenty of hammy characters that keep things entertaining. So I know some are wondering by now, okay, if this game is so good and such a classic, then why is it not at the top of the list, asshole? Well, it's because even stone cold classics like this have some bullshit that sours the experience. Anyone that's played this game probably knows where I'm going with this. These trippy psychological levels were terrible. I get that these are supposed to have us enter the headspace of Max and really see the psychological toll the murder of his family is having on him, but man, did they have to make us do these? This is some of the shittiest, most out of place platforming segments I've ever seen in a game. Your jump ain't shit, and they literally have you on a string with controls that aren't designed for them. But it's not just this that I have a problem with. As much as I like the gameplay in this game, too much of it is some peekaboo shit. You have to check and hide behind most corners in this game, and that's because enemies have hit scan, near instant reactions, and you die in only like a couple of shots. I don't know how the fuck you're supposed to approach some of these bosses. They kill you so fast, and they can take so many shots that it feels like you're supposed to cheese them. I'm willing to admit that I suck at the game, but I'm 90% sure that this game is just hard, because it's not just the bosses, normal enemies, and even the environments be killing you out of nowhere sometimes. Sometimes it's rewarding overcoming this, but other times it does feel like some bullshit. Also, Max Payne 2 exists, which doesn't have any of this, and is frankly a better game in almost every way. But I'll talk about that when that game comes up, which is...
I want to report a crime.
You've come to the right place.
Okay, so my boyfriend, the loser jerk, sits on his ass all day and keeps playing these stupid video games. You know, stupid dick justice and stuff. Doesn't go to work, gives me no thought.
Unfortunately, being a jerk is not a crime.
No, I wasn't finished. I'm getting to it. So I got real sick of it and threw the television out of the window. It was mine. I can do whatever I want with it, right?
As long as no one got hurt.
That's what I told him. He's my ex, really. But now the sicko's threatening to kill me. That's a crime, right? He's been playing those video games an awful lot. Makes him a very good shooter. Holding that controller's like holding a gun, they say in the news. You gotta help me. I fear for my life.
Oh yeah, this is what I'm talking about. This is not just peak Max Payne. This is one of the best Rockstar games of that era. And that's saying a lot, as anyone that's played their games during that time knows that that was a fucking golden age for them. Doesn't feel like this game is that highly regarded though. The first game is the one that gets all the praise. Part of that is Sam Lake's face, which is iconic at this point, but also it's the first game, so it introduced all the shit that made Max Payne dope. I get valuing originality, but this is one of those cases where I prefer refinement, and Max Payne 2 refines quite a lot to where it's my favorite of the trilogy. The addicting bullet time is back, and everything about it has been improved. You no longer have to stand still to activate it, you move faster, you can reload mid slow-mo, and you don't die as quickly, which gives the player more leeway to clear out rooms in the most stylish way possible. The cherry on top, or the new ragdoll physics where shooting dudes has them flying yards back and shit. Some welcome unintentional comedy amongst the chaos. But yeah, no more of that peekaboo shit. You can bum rush through any room now and react to all types of danger coming at you on the fly. Does require less planning and makes the game a hell of a lot easier, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I still love the first Max Payne 2, but constantly reloading a save did get annoying after a while. You're more of an unstoppable one-man militia here, and the series, in my opinion, has a lot more fun when it taps into that. Oh yeah, there's also the fact that the game's presentation is a clear level up. We still got those unique comic strips, but this game isn't afraid to showcase its in-game graphics, and that's because the detail of the characters and environments are noticeably higher. We're no longer dealing with a blocky, borderline PlayStation 1 looking game. Nah, this is firmly PlayStation 2, and even then, this game doesn't look too dated 2 decades later. The story in this one is also a lot more compelling to me. Max is still tortured by his past, but the game is less focused on that and more focused on the burgeoning romance he has with Mona Sachs. They got the whole Batman-Catwoman chemistry here where they clearly want each other, but they know it would never work, with Max being a cop and her being a contract killer. Just like that dynamic, it's always entertaining whenever Max and Mona are on screen. Max fucking with bad guys in the first game was already entertaining on its own, but having a partner to bounce off of fleshes out his character more outside of just being a rugged law enforcer. But it's not just the love story, the criminal side of things are interesting too. We got a new group called the Cleaners murking everyone in their way for more mysterious masterminds behind the scenes. Shit unfolds in a pretty suspenseful way with a handful of unexpected betrayals and deaths. That midpoint in particular was wild. One thing I don't see get talked about enough is how low-key funny this game is. I already mentioned the ragdoll physics, but it's not just that. There's a lot of weirdly funny moments sprinkled throughout this game. You know, shit like these idiot mobsters not recognizing Max and him pretending to be one of them, or the whole mission where you have to protect Vinny from blowing up in this dumbass costume. You would think that such a gritty game wouldn't find time to be this humorous, but it somehow works. But yeah, this game is yet another stone cold classic. Only gripe I have is that it is on the short side, being only 4 to 6 hours, but that's not really much of a gripe to me because I would rather be left wanting more than wanting the shit to end. I swear it's not recency bias. This game is that good, and the Game of the Year discourse last year should have been between this and Baldur's Gate rather than Spider-Man. This is already one of the greatest sequels of all time. The jump in quality from the first game to this is like going from eating Wendy's to Ruth Chris. Everything about this game just hits. It looks gorgeous, the atmosphere is sublime, the gameplay is engaging all throughout, and the story here might be the best they've ever written. They've leaned more into the survival horror for this outing, and it makes this game a hell of a lot more interesting than its predecessor. No more constantly getting jumped by Taken whenever you step into the darkness. Nah. Alan Wake 2 is more cerebral with it. Fights are spaced out to where there's actual tension built between finding the Taken, just exploring the creepy world of both the Dark Place and Bright Falls in near silence. And then when you do fight these assholes, the encounters feel more significant due to these guys being the most dangerous they've ever been. Aggressive as hell with multiple swings at your ass, and you don't have the generous slow-mo dodge here. Factor in more limited ammo in this game, and yeah, you're fighting for your life more often than not now, but that's what makes it fun. There's more you gotta think about than just flashing and shooting guys, and even that loop feels a lot better here with the over-the-shoulder aiming giving a clear view on what you're shooting at. Yo, the sawed-off shotgun in this game is already in the echelon of some of gaming's best shotguns for me. The impact is just lovely. It wrecks shop as soon as you get it. Just barbecue chicken all day. But you know, it's not just the combat. The game as a whole is this really well-paced horror theme park, but with an interesting mystery on top. Dope-ass reality warping puzzles where you're figuring shit out, a diverse set of boss fights that were thrilling to fight against, and plenty of scares to go around. Yo, this game is actually frightening. More intimidating enemies aside, the much improved graphical leap has made the woods of Bright Falls feel that more oppressive. It's so dark that you can barely see anything in your peripheral. Trails are cluttered as shit to where you're always wondering if there's something stalking you behind the seams. And the lack of music makes trudging through these woods feel eerie as hell. And then you got the Dark Place, which is probably the most nightmarish setting in any Remedy game so far. Imagine Gotham, but instead of people, it's full of shadow men that stare at you and know your name. These levels where you're trying to escape this hellhole with Wake is when the game got really psychological, especially with Wake actually having the power to rewrite certain parts of a scene on the fly now. That boy goes through it in this game. God damn. There was a lot they were trying to juggle here plot-wise. You have Wake doing what I already mentioned, but you also have this new character, Saga Anderson, here trying to piece together what's going on. You can switch between the two characters at any point in time in their journeys, and it surprisingly doesn't fuck up the pacing. It's like a Christopher Nolan film where it's hopping back and forth constantly between different points, but each scene connects in a way to where it isn't confusing. Saga's storyline is definitely the A-plot, but both were given plenty of care. In a way, this is like Alan Wake 2 and 3 at once. Each character's campaign on their own are about the length of Alan Wake 1, and they both eventually converge in this really cool climax. I know a lot of my praises here are shallow, but that's because it's pretty damn hard to talk about this game without going into spoilers. This is one of those games where you need like a whole 30-minute video to give it its props. Just know that the story is so dense that a third of the fun is connecting the literal plot points on a massive wall. I'm not even joking. In many ways, Alan Wake 2 was like the ultimate Remedy game. It calls back to the events of the previous Alan Wake games, it references concepts related to control, and it examines the first two Max Payne games and contextualizes what they meant to Remedy. Only modern game that doesn't get much love is Quantum Break, but they do have Shawn Ashmore in this game as this guy. If Alan Wake 1 was a weird meta-narrative about the nature of writing, Alan Wake 2 is an even weirder meta-narrative on the power of art and what it even means to create art. Yeah, I think this is one for the books, y'all. I think in 5 to 10 years, we're going to be looking back and be like, yo, they were really on one when they created this. And we're going to be seeing a lot more video essays like why Alan Wake 2 was a masterpiece. And you know what? I'm going to be here for it because this game is phenomenal. Already my favorite in their catalog and one of the best horror games I've played in a minute. But anyway, that's all I gotta say about this. Make sure to check out my other vids on the channel if you like what you saw here, and subscribe if you want to stay tuned to more vids like this in the future. Obviously, you know, do all the usual things to help this video out in the algorithm, and I'll see y'all next time.